As a filmmaker turned content creator, over the past 16 plus years, I've pretty much tried every camera to balance image quality and convenience. Cinema cameras like the RED Komodo give you that rich, beautiful image, but they do slow you down. Mirrorless cameras are fast and flexible, but they always feel like a compromise. Here I have the Nikon ZR, which may be the middle ground I've been waiting for. It's small enough to travel with, powerful enough for serious work, and honestly, it's the first camera in years that's made me rethink my setup. I've shot on RED for over 10 years now. I bought the Komodo in 2020 as my first owner-operator RED camera, and I've also shot on everything from Blackmagic right here to Lumix cameras with the GH2 all the way to the GH5, going back to the actual original Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera, and this was my first interchangeable lens camera that I ever owned. Before this, I was shooting on an HVX 200, and that was a completely different animal, but that got me through high school and college until this bad boy came out. And it's interesting because the Nikon ZR is pretty much the first camera that I think is the spiritual successor to the original Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. I bought this camera because in film school we shot on the RED 1. I knew what REDs were capable of, but they were just way out of my price point. And this was the first camera that you could shoot internal RAW and a decent internal 10-bit codec for an affordable price. I shot on the RED 1 throughout film school, and as much as I liked RED, it was just not in the cards price point-wise. I was also pretty young. When I got the RED Komodo in 2020, this was the first RED camera that I felt was affordable enough for me to be able to use on set as an owner-operator. And within the first year, this camera paid for itself. Now, it's 5 years later, this camera has dropped quite a lot in value, and in some ways, it's kind of old. It uses old media, the battery system is interesting. I pretty much only use this because I have issues with BP batteries. I'll talk about that in another video. But now we have the ZR, which comes in at $2,200. The RED Komodo's $3,000, but the ZR does what I kind of wanted the RED Komodo to do in year 3 or 4 of ownership. It's part of the reason why I ended up moving to the Sony FX30 as my main camera for gigs that weren't narrative work. I'm filming on the FX30 right now, and I would say I've used this camera way more over the past 3 years than the RED Komodo, especially because my work has transitioned to where I do mostly content creation and podcasting now, and I only have a few narrative gigs per year, but it's why I keep this camera around, because this is what I bring on these gigs. But I'm always typically renting out either a second Komodo, Komodo X, whatever it may be on those gigs, and sometimes it's not even about making the extra rental price. It's just nice to have my own extra B camera that has autofocus that I can maybe stick at an extra angle, but also be able to use for the non-filmmaking stuff. And the ZR seems like price-wise, size-wise, and feature-wise, it may be the camera to fit all of those checkboxes in my checklist. So in today's video, I want to go over why I purchased the Nikon ZR, especially as someone who I've never owned a Nikon camera. And when RED sold to Nikon after some of the issues I've had with the Komodo, I quite frankly didn't think I'd be buying another RED camera ever again. But Nikon did some things with this ZR that made me rethink that decision. And for the first time, I think, in RED's history, now they actually have a camera that does what the Pocket camera did. It comes in at an incredibly low price point. It's an incredibly small camera, and it fits a lot of the boxes, not necessarily for everybody, but definitely for a lot of users. And I think this is going to be the next hot camera, to the point where I had a C50 on pre-order, and I decided to go in on this, especially using the Megadap adapter. I get that actually in a few days. Right now I have this Viltrox adapter that is a Z to E mount adapter and will let me use my Sony lenses. So I'm going to be doing a bunch of videos on this camera over the next few months. November is going to be a crazy month for me, and I'm going to be bringing this with me everywhere. On set in late November, I'm going to New York for a few days where I'll have this as a travel camera, and then I'm going to be using it for podcasting. So I'm going to kind of throw this thing in the ringer for all different types of video work over the next few months. So if you want to follow me on my journey with the Nikon ZR as someone who's not really brand dependent. I don't know if this is going to be the answer, but we'll find out together. Make sure to hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell to keep up to date with the latest videos on the channel so you can see when the next Nikon ZR video comes out. That all being said, when this Nikon ZR came out, I had absolutely no plans on buying it. I pre-ordered the C50 the day before this was announced. And that's because I've had a lot of RF lenses due to the RED Komodo. And I was at the point where I figured, you know what, maybe I'll just use my RF lenses on a really nice RF camera body, since the C50 is kind of like the FX3 of the Canon world. But then I got my hands on one of the first shipped out units, thanks to my friend Johnny, and I was really surprised. You know, this is a camera that shoots R3D, and it has decent autofocus and can use Sony lenses, which is kind of what I was wishing, 3 years into owning my FX30 and some of the other Sony cameras I had. I wished I could have shared my Sony lenses with this. I know I keep calling Nikon Nikon. That's a hard habit I'm going to have to break with this camera. But due to its features, its size, and its price point, it really has me wanting to try this thing, especially as a gimbal travel camera. What scares me about this camera, though, is we hear about the Megadap adapter, the Viltrox adapter, and how you can use the Sony lenses. I haven't really seen much footage, so I want to put that to the test some of my Sony lenses, see if you need the image corrections that the Sony bodies provide for some of the lenses I have, like the 11mm. We'll see. I don't know. I just haven't seen much footage, so I'm a little skeptical. And I think, like a lot of you out there have realized, when it comes to buying a camera, we can only help so much as YouTubers. You really do have to make your own informed decision on whether this is the right camera for you. And although we can help you with that, sometimes you just have to have this in your hands. And that's kind of what I felt with the ZR. From all the videos, I actually felt like I didn't want it until I actually had it in my hands. And it wasn't just hype anymore. I mean, the screen right here, incredibly huge for a mirrorless camera, to the point where I don't think I'm even going to buy a cage for this thing. I'm going to try and use it as naked as possible, and that's how I've been using my FX30 lately. I literally leave the cage at home all the time, and I want to try and just use this built-in screen. I want to try and use my DJI mics with this because of its 32-bit float. There's a lot of things I really like, and call me an outsider with this. I understand why Nikon went with the micro HDMI on the side right here. I don't see where they would have had room for a full-size HDMI, and luckily from my days with Canon mirrorless cameras, I have a bunch of really expensive micro HDMI cables. I don't really think I'm going to buy much to have to invest in this Nikon ZR. I'm going to be adapting a lot of lenses, especially EF lenses. In that video I put out a few weeks ago, we were adapting the Sigma 24-35 on a Fringer EF to Nikon Z adapter, and it worked okay, especially for being adapted from a Nikon to a Canon EF lens. So there's a lot of question marks I have with this. The other thing I noticed, and I don't really get why it hasn't been brought up quite as much. So obviously it makes sense to use this as a secondary camera with a RED. But I didn't see any 17:9 6K options in this camera, and that's a little concerning because when I'm on narrative gigs, we're pretty much always filming 17:9 in here. Now, I guess you could crop the top and the bottom of the 6K 16:9 image, but it would be interesting to see if they do put a 17:9 image, because I'd rather not have to go through the extra steps of cropping the top and the bottom. I'd rather just come out 17:9. Now, earlier this year, it was the first year where I really had nothing booked with the RED Komodo. So I started to use this camera as my travel camera. I brought it to New York for build, and as great as the image quality is, there were just so many sacrifices. I mean, as small as I got this kit together, this is pretty much one of the smallest Komodo kits I've seen, especially using a V-mount battery. There was just still a lot of things I had to put together. I had to put on this handle. I was able to get this mag mount for my phone as a monitor. I tried to keep it as small as possible, but between the boot up time, having this V-mount, there were just a lot of things that still took me time to get going. And then on top of all of that, when I'm filming outdoors, I have this IR UV cut filter. Maybe you could see right here on the front. It's that little filter in front of this lens. You pretty much have to use an IR cut UV filter with RED cameras, especially if you're filming with heavy variable ND filters. You get crazy magenta shift if you don't. And on the Nikon ZR, you don't need that. We were pretty heavily using ND on a few of these shots, and I did not need any kind of IR cut UV filter. We're able to just straight up use the ND filter, which is great because it's just one less thing you have to bring with you, especially if you're trying to be run and gun. You want to bring the least amount as possible, and that's how I want to roll with this thing. I want to just slap a lens on here. If I need audio, put my DJI mics on and get going. Then there's the price. $2,200 for this camera? That's it. And the crazy part is most competitors aren't charging that much more or that much less with less features. You know, the FX30 is almost the same price as this, and with the XLR handle, it becomes more expensive than this. Without it, it's a little bit less. But then the FX3 is like twice the price of the Nikon ZR. Plus the Canon cameras, I mean, the C50 is over $1,000 more. Nikon did a really good job at making this really competitively priced for the features it offers. Some may edge it on autofocus or ergonomics, sure, but Nikon nailed the value here. It's a creator's camera priced like a tool, not a toy. For the past 7 years, I've been obsessed with shrinking my kit without sacrificing quality. The Osmo Pocket 3 blew me away for its size, but it's not yet there for pro work. The Nikon ZR finally feels like a camera that's small, but delivers that cinematic look. And yes, it's got a compact body, it's got a full frame sensor, and it's got a pro level image. The only downside is you have to pretty much shoot in R3D to get the best image quality out of this camera. Now, as I've learned with filming on the FX30, image quality isn't everything. And so when I'm shooting stuff, maybe like YouTube work or podcasting, I definitely am not going to be filming that stuff in R3D. At least the podcasting, it's really long record times. I don't need the R3D files. So I don't necessarily care as much if you take a little bit of an image quality hit filming in the more compressed video modes, because that's how I'm going to be able to use this camera as an all-in-one camera and not have to have a bunch of different tools. Most of my trips over the past few years until 2025, I was bringing the Komodo and I was bringing my FX30, where if I don't necessarily need the Komodo for global shutter, and I can get away with the image quality that the Nikon ZR has, I could just bring this one camera instead of two cameras and then bring my Osmo Pocket 3 as maybe like an extra camera for vlogging, something like that. Now for higher end projects, if the budget is there, I am definitely bringing the RED Komodo still, just because we know what the RED Komodo is capable of. It has the full 16-bit R3D RAW files, unlike the 12-bit R3D RAW files out of this camera. But I may still bring this Nikon ZR as a B camera, especially if the budget allows for that. It saves on rentals, saves setup time, and matches close enough in post for most of these middle-end jobs. Now, when I'm traveling or shooting for a podcast, this is still going to be the only camera I want to bring. So here's where I want to talk about what's coming up next, some videos I have planned on the Nikon ZR, and you can ask any questions you want in the comments below. That way I can answer them in the upcoming videos. So the first video is going to be a collaboration with B&H on the Nikon 28-135 Cinema Series lens. It's the first Cinema Series Nikon lens, and this is the first Cinema Series Nikon body, and I want to pair them together. I don't necessarily see myself using that lens for narrative filmmaking, but for events, for YouTube, maybe even for podcasting, I'm very interested. The next video, we're going to see how the Nikon ZR performs on a real set and if it's usable as an A-cam. So I want to bring it. I have a few pickup shots for the Star Trek fan project I've been working on for the past few years, and it just made sense with the budget to test this thing out. They're not very complicated shots, and I could quite honestly do them with my FX30 if I needed to just stay really small, but the fact I could use this camera and shoot in R3D, that's what we're going to do. Plus it being full frame, all that greatness. So we'll do some tests on set, not just for what we're actually filming for the movie, but I'll be doing some test footage with some lenses that haven't been announced yet that you'll see them soon enough. And then speaking of the FX30, I'll be doing comparisons with this camera against the FX30, with this camera properly against the Komodo, with this camera against the Blackmagic that I've got right down here, just to see the difference in the image quality of two full frame cameras. What's crazy is this camera used to be much closer in price to the Nikon ZR. Now it's much more expensive, especially if you're going to do all these add-ons like I did with the EVF. I have the battery plate that's just sitting over there out of frame. It'll be interesting to see, because I was putting a lot of my eggs in the Blackmagic basket. Like I said in the beginning of this video, did not think I would be picking up a RED camera ever again, especially a Nikon. but they really hit it out of the park on this Nikon ZR to the point where this may be going at some point. And although I'm not going to say I'm never going to shoot with Blackmagic again, right now, I feel like Blackmagic is at a point where they're concentrating the most on image quality and tools that are the best for people who are in narrative or high-end production, but for a great value, where this is the first camera where it can be used for narrative production and that kind of stuff, but it's not just meant for that. You could use this for all different types of video work, and that's where this camera really got my attention. So if you're a creator that works in the film industry and also happens to do content creation, videography work, this may be a camera you want to take a look at, and we'll be covering it way more soon. So as I said, let me know if you have any questions for upcoming videos or things you'd like me to cover in the comments below. I'm really excited about this camera. I'm really hoping it does most of what I think it can, and we'll all find out together. So I want to thank you for watching. My name's Jeff Fagien. I will catch you in the next video.